Ciao, I'm Vito De Salvo, and this is La Dolce Vita.
La Dolce Vita. La Dolce Vita.
Today's show is all about bread, how to bake it, and how to cook with it. First, I'll make a schiacciata, which is similar to a focaccia. Then I'm going to make a typical Tuscan bread soup called ribollita, using authentic Italian bread. I'll then make a refreshing bread salad called panzanella, using a crusty Tuscan bread. And of course, bruschetta, using a typical French baguette. But first, I'm going to introduce you to two close friends of mine who are going to share stories about baking bread the old-fashioned way. Morning, Aunt Catherine. How are you? Aldo, how you been?
Nice to see you.
So today I'm going to introduce my good friend Catherine Montecarlo. Everyone calls her Aunt Catherine. And Aldo Bartolotta. Aldo is the owner of 4 Giant Eagle supermarkets. So Aldo, what is the good life to you, the sweet life, La Dolce Vita?
Well, I guess if you summed it up, it was being born into an Italian family where there were values and great tradition, and you call it La Dolce Vita, but I call it the Vita Dolce. I lived the life. It was really sweet. It was just a great, great life.
Well, today we're talking about bread and bread making, bread baking, and one of the things, the ways that I like to make bread the best is the one way that you told me in the past, when you were a kid you had the brick oven. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, my uncle built it in the mid-30s. An uncle of mine built the oven for us, and you could make 12 to 15 loaves of bread in.
Did you help make that oven, Aldo?
No, but I, as a kid, I do remember my uncle building it, and he was a funny guy to begin with. He was very comical, and he worked his butt off, but I mean, he started out with, like I say, fire brick, and then he put cement all over it, and I don't know how long it took him to make it, but he really did a good job, and I'll tell you what, it was worth it because the bread that come out of that oven, and it was fantastic. It was just really great.
And what did your families traditionally make with the bread? I mean, a lot of Italians that I remember, that my parents, they never threw anything away. So if you made the bread once a week for the whole week, sometimes you had some stale bread at the end of the week, or they always save those for soups or...
Yes, for soups and for crumbs, bread crumbs. And there was many purposes for the loaf. But usually there wasn't any left over because you had to bake it right away. Because there was 6 children, and my grandmother and grandfather came to live with us too. So there was a bunch of us, so sometimes you had to bake the bread twice a week.
Well, there's nothing better than fresh bread.
That's right.
Thanks again, Aldo.
Ciao, Vito.
Ciao, Aldo. And Catherine.
Thanks, Vito.
Let's go make some bread.
Let's go. Okay.
When we come back, I'll show you the art of baking bread, so don't go away. Well, we're back in the kitchen now, and you saw the bread I picked out to make our different items. Now I'm going to show you how to make one specific type of bread. It's almost like a focaccia. It's called schiacciata. Now, schiaccia in Italian, I said, is to press down. We're going to take a little bit, 2 ounces exactly of yeast, and 1.5 cups of warm water. Warm, you want it to be about 105 degrees, a little bit warm to the touch. So you want it just enough to activate the yeast, but not to kill it. So just a little bit less than 1.5 cups. And I'm not really measuring ingredients just because I'm just so used to making these things that after a while you don't measure them. So if you want to make sure that your yeast is alive, you can let it sit there for about 10 minutes and start to bubble. So what I'm going to do now, this is really simple because you can do everything all together. I'm going to have 6 cups of flour. I'm just going to throw it right in. About 2 tablespoons of olive oil. 1/3 cup of cream, heavy cream. About a teaspoon of honey. A little bit of sugar. A little bit of salt, and 1 egg. Put your dough hook on. So let the machine do the work. Less for you to do. And this is what it'll look like. Okay? Right here. Now what you want to do is let that rise in not too hot of an area, but not too cold of an area either. Just about room temperature for about an hour, hour and 20 minutes. Okay? And what you'll end up with is something like this. As you can tell, all the bubbles, you can see that yeast is working. Okay? You always want to cover it too, because you don't want that to form a film. You can use a bigger bowl than this and it won't stick, but you never want it to let the air hit that, because then it'll form a crust almost. So you want to take that out. We're going to take a normal baking pan, a lot of extra virgin olive oil. Just line that pan. Don't worry how much olive oil. I know, look at that, it's a lot, right? It's good. Really want to get that in there. So we're going to take this, put it right on our pan, and we're going to spread that out. And we're going to let it rise again. Okay, and we're going to let that rest again for about 20 minutes. One of the recipes we're going to make with our already made breads is called a ribollita. Now, ribollita means to reboil. Now, basically what this is a bread soup, zuppa di pane, okay? But ribollita is the next day. It's always better the next day, they say. So, we're going to start off with dried cannellini beans, okay? The dried beans are always the best to use. You can use the canned ones too, but make sure you rinse them and when you take them out of the can. But what you want to do with the dried beans is you want to put them in a bowl and you want to soak them in water overnight, or at least 8 hours. Okay? Then throw that water away. Put in another pot of water on, and bring that up to a boil. And let that boil until the beans are cooked. Here I have some that are already cooked. And you don't want to put anything in here. You can put some onion if you would like, but don't put any salt, because what salt will do is make the skins of the beans hard. So you want those to be as soft as possible. So you see all this water in here. The good thing about starting with dried beans is you have all this water. Now this water is going to be used. We're going to use that. What we're going to do now is we're going to take out half of our beans. Just about that much. Okay? I started with 1 pound of beans. And then with this, what we're going to do is we're going to come to our Cuisinart. Now what you want to do is you want to puree this. You want to puree half the beans with the liquid. And that's going to be the base of our soup. Now you don't want to puree all the liquid because it could be too much and then your soup will be watery again. So let's start with that. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to let this cool down for a second. And we're going to start the base of the soup. Now with the base of the soup, what we're going to do is just with a little olive oil, some garlic, about 2 cloves, some onions, about 1 onion, 2 carrots, 2 stalks of celery, and 1 leek. Now we're going to let that cook down. This is a very hearty soup that they use a lot in winter. This is a poor man's dish originally. Something that had a lot of vegetables. It was very cheap to make. You could put bread in from the next day so things wouldn't go bad. No one who was poor liked to throw things away, so always figuring out ways how to use old bread and vegetables and things of that nature. Our focaccia, as you can tell, has risen a little bit here. Now, the reason why they call it schiacciata is because it rises and you want to poke holes in it like that, almost like a focaccia, and it's smashed. Now what you want to do is drizzle more olive oil over it. Some nice rock salt. A little bit of pepper. And then we're going to just chop up a little bit of rosemary to put on top. Okay, so we just finished up chopping a little bit of rosemary. Throw that on. Maybe throw in another couple dots if you want with your fingers. Let the kids do that. It's fun, you know? Throw that right in the oven. When we come back, I'll show you my versions of the well-known bruschetta, so don't go away. There are two things in cooking I live by. One, your pasta water always has to taste like the ocean, and two, you should always hear cooking. If you hear it, you know it's cooking. If not, it's steaming. It's still a cooking method, but you always want to do that when you're sauteing something. So I'm going to throw in a couple tomatoes now, about 3 tomatoes. Let those cook down for a couple minutes. And then meanwhile, I'm going to show you what vegetables we're going to put in here. I have 3 greens. It's a very wintry dish. I have a red Swiss chard that I cut up, about 1 bunch. And what you want to do with this is just really take it off. You don't want that stem in there, so just peel it off like that. Chop it up. Okay, throw this away because it's very bitter. And then I have kale, and you want to do the same thing with the kale. Okay, just take it right off the stem, chop that up. Again, I have 1 bunch of kale. And then a Savoy cabbage. I have about half a head of Savoy cabbage. So I'm going to put all 3 of those into my pot now. And let that cook down. And it's really going to take a while for this to cook down. Probably around 20 to 30 minutes. You want to let this cook. Then we're going to throw our beans back in. And the bread part comes in last. But that's the best part. So we're going to let that cook down nice and slow. So at this point, our greens have cooked down. And what we're going to do, I'm going to throw in the beans that we took out. And also the puree of bean that we had. Now at this point, it's pretty much done. We're going to season it up a little bit with some salt and pepper. And also a little bit of thyme. Have a little bit of that picked. That'll flavor it nicely. That's a real herb you taste a lot in Tuscany and Italy in general. When you make this, you want to make a big portion. Don't just try to make it for, 1 plateful. You want to make a nice pot because this lasts. You can freeze it if you'd like. So at that point, we're going to let it cook nice and slow for about 20 minutes. We're going to move on, and I'm going to show you a bruschetta. Now, there are 2 types of bread antipasti items that are in Italy. Crostini and bruschetta. Bruschettas are normally hot, and crostinis are normally cold. We're going to just brush them lightly with some olive oil. And we're going to come over to our grill, and we're going to grill our bread. So as I'm letting those cook, we're going to make our different bruschettas. The first one we're going to make is a basic. Tomato, basil, and garlic. There's not much to this. I'm sure you've made it before. All you have to do is have ripe tomatoes, ripe basil. If you want to knock out the seeds, that's fine. You don't want all that juice in there, and that'll make the bread a little mushy. You don't want that. I promise you we'd have garlic in here too, but not like you think. I'm not going to just chop garlic and put it in here. I don't like to eat just like that raw garlic. It's a little too harsh. I like to take the spice of it. So what we're going to do is when our bread comes off, I'm going to take raw garlic and rub that bread and it's almost going to melt like butter. We already have that one set. Now I have another one for you that we don't have to grill. We're just going to put right in the oven. I love this one. What we're going to do here is we have sausage, just plain sausage you can buy in the grocery store, and stracchino cheese. Now this is an Italian cheese made, I believe, by sheep's milk. Okay, and it's a lot like any kind of cream cheese or a Philadelphia or something like that. It's a little softer than any kind of Philadelphia though. It would remind you of like almost a yogurt. So what I'm going to do is just mix that cheese right in with the sausage. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to top our breads that's not even been toasted. Now this isn't something you'd see in a restaurant. This is something that I used to have at my relative's house in Italy, all my friends' houses. When you go over, you walk in the door, they have some little appetizers. This is it. So we're just going to line a couple of those up and pop those right in the oven. About 3 minutes, they're ready. Okay, so now our other ones are ready. We're going to take those off. And we're going to rub that garlic. Now look, I'm starting with a whole piece of garlic, okay? When you rub it, it almost is like it turns into an oil on the bread. And then just top it with our tomatoes. Now I'm really today making you an array of different things. This could be great in the summer when the tomatoes are fresh. I'm making you the ribollita, which is great in the wintertime. But you really want to choose what you cook around the season. If it's, the tomatoes are fresh, you want to do something with tomatoes. If it's in the wintertime and you have hearty green vegetables and beans and stuff like that, cook with that. I mean, your product will come out 100% better just based on the product you use. If you start with good ingredients, it's very hard to mess it up. We'll be right back to finish up the schisciata, our bread soup, and our bread salad, so stay right there. Every time I make these, people go nuts. I'm going to let this cool. Now what you might have to do is look at the bottom and see if it's cooked. Okay? You want to have that nice golden crust. But right here I still want to cook a little bit. So I just flipped it over for a minute and I'm going to put it back in the oven for about 2-3 more minutes. In the meanwhile, when I come out with it, I want to let it rest for a couple minutes on a rack. Okay? Get that air underneath it. Now what I'm going to show you in the meanwhile is a panzanella. Now the panzanella is a Tuscan bread salad. Now the key components are normally cucumbers, tomatoes, red onion, of course the bread, and a little bit of vinegar. So we're going to take our bread and we're going to take all the crust off. And we're just going to cube the bread. Okay. And we're going to let that soak with the vinegar a little bit. Not too much, just enough for it to soak. A couple tablespoons. Okay, toss that around. But basically you want that to be like your vinaigrette. Let that bread soak in the vinegar. Toss it with some olive oil. And throw in your cucumbers, tomato, some red onion, always want to season it with salt, some pepper. Just give it a nice stir again. That's it. It's done. Just put it in a nice big bowl. And there it is. As you can tell, the underside is a little more cooked now. Okay? You want that golden brown color. So all you want to do, carefully, is put that right on that rack and let it rest for about 10 minutes. Let it cool down. Now, in the meanwhile, we also have our soup again, and that's about done right now. See that consistency? That's pretty much what you're looking for. You don't want it to be too thick because now you're going to add your bread, and the bread's going to really soak up all that soup, all that liquid. What we're going to do now, classically, what they do with this is they layer the bread. You get a big soup tureen. You slice the bread. You put the bread down. Put some soup. Put some more bread. Some more soup, just like you would a lasagna. But today, since I'm going to put it for a dish, I'm just going to dice a little bit up. Now with this, I'm leaving the crust on. I love the crust on bread. And most people, you can take it off. Some recipes say to take it off. Some say keep it on. I like the crust. To me, it's the best part of the bread. So I'm just going to take some of that bread, throw it right in our soup. Again, we had our panzanella. That was our bread salad. Our different types of bruschetta, the sausage and stracchino cheese, the classic tomato with the garlic, the bread soup, ribollita, and just finishing up, we have our focaccia. Now this is good anytime. So, thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time on the Dolce Vita.
See the world spinning by. Jump on in for the ride. It's a life oh so sweet. Dolce Vita for me.